everyone, and welcome to Breaking Up with Corporate. I'm Alex Murray, and I have Susan Trissetti with me, and I'm going to let her introduce our guest today.
Welcome. Pete Schramm is a people person. He's a founder, engineer, author, and speaker on a mission to ensure nobody has to navigate their professional journey alone. He's the CEO of Latitude, a career growth platform that helps organizations scale mentorship, build personal boards of advisors, map careers, and measure connections and engagements. Pete has delivered over 125 keynote speeches and workshops. He has his own podcast called the Pathfinders Podcast and writes about modern mentorship, retention, and leadership. Pete has also written a book called Pathfinders, Navigate Your Career Map with a Personal Board of Advisors. Before launching Latitude, he spent a decade in high accountability aerospace and defense environments, leading cross-functional work and building operating rhythms. He loves basketball, works on his family farm, travels to new countries, and helps people find their best jobs. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, guys. Hello, everybody listening.
Well, thank you so much for joining our podcast, Pete. It's wonderful to have you on. So take us through your journey. Wow, what a bio. You've had lots of experience. So I think everyone's kind of excited to hear. Where did you get started? And tell us and kind of catch it up to where you are a little now.
Yeah, so the journey begins in Western Pennsylvania, near Saxonburg, where Susan's path and mine crossed. And it's weird not to call her Mrs. Trissetti. Let me just say that out loud here. She's like another mom to me. But right up the street, grew up on a farm in Western PA, in a town called Butler. And so there's not a whole lot of mentors that you find in the cornfields or in the stalls cleaning out cow manure. But I was always curious. Where did that come from? I don't quite know. Other than the fact that my mom and dad at a young age always said, our purpose here is to better the lives of others. I said, well, it's tough to better their lives if I can't even see them. And I don't even know what they're thinking about or what they're doing. So I then got exposed. Once you graduate, you get promoted in the farming industry, especially the family farm, you get to go to farmers market. That's whenever you get to see people, you get to practice your mental math skills, carry the bags for the old ladies to the car. That was fun stuff for me. And I'll never forget, guys, I got paid $20, a full $20 bill for working from 5 a.m. until 2 p.m. And I thought I was hot stuff, So I progressed from there, Catholic grade school, public high school, then private high school, graduated from Swickley Academy, went into engineering. I studied mechanical engineering, played 2 sports, a couple of internships throughout my college journey. Left the country for 6 months to go to Hong Kong because that's what, every person from a farm in Western PA thought was a good next step. So then I got my master's in mechanical engineering and then got to work at Lockheed Martin. Absolutely remarkable organization. Throughout that time, I went around the world twice and got to work on so many different kinds of technology with remarkable people all around the globe. And a cool way to sum up some of the tech that I've worked on throughout my career. If you see the new Top Gun movie, there's some cool stuff going on in that movie. There are dozens of pieces of technology that I've been able to work on along the way at various stages of my professional journey. So this is pretty cool, right? And I asked my boss one day, I say, hey, how can I be the best employee you ever had? He said, well, you got to find a mentor. I said, fantastic. What's that mean? Where do I find one? Where do I get one? He said, well, you just kind of figure it out. Love the guy to death. Just texted him. He got his PhD the other day. Fantastic person. But I'm scratching my head as an employee, right? And I said, well, if I need this thing to be successful, I should probably go figure it out. So you want to talk about trial and error along the way? That was the journey of Pete's path was, hey, what do you do? How'd you get here? Do you have a mentor? What's a good mentor look like? What's a bad mentor look like? So I got a couple of these mentors, and some I would talk with more frequently, some less frequently, look at different approaches with each of them. And then I became the mentoring guy. I'm like, what in the world's going on? People say, hey, would you come and speak to our organization. Talk to us about this mentorship stuff. I'm like, me? Yeah, sure. I'll tell you what I know, what I don't know. I don't know how helpful it's going to be. And they said I didn't stink. And then more people kept calling. They're like, hey, would you talk to us? Would you talk to us? And then more people kept calling inside the company and say, hey, can you connect me to somebody? Can you help me figure out who can guide me? I was like, yeah, sure. 1 or 2 hours of this a day on top of 10, 12, 14 hours of work. And I was still playing basketball at the time, really good basketball in DC. And then I said, you know what? I don't have all the answers and I don't have enough time to help everybody, but they deserve a solution. And so that's whenever I drew a line in the sand, and I guess it was dirt. It was in DC, Northwest DC, DuPont Circle, March 4th, 2018. I said, I'm going to start a company. And I walked back inside this 600 square foot apartment and I Googled how to start a business. So fast forward, company's called Latitude. That's obviously a couple years past March 4th, 2018. I went full time in COVID and moved back to Western Pennsylvania. We'll get into more of the story, but Latitude's B2B SaaS. We're able to show that you can build a tech company from rural Western Pennsylvania, scale it up to a 7-figure business, and help tens of thousands of people all around the country. So that's what boomeranged me back to Butler.
Wow. That's quite a journey. So what was like the time frame for you? Like how long were you, in your first position before you started Latitude?
So it was about 10 years or so as a W-2. There was about 2 or 3 years of overlap of, what do they say, 5 to 9 is the side hustle and what fills your heart. And then you have your 9 to 5, which was usually like a 8 to 7. And then your work nights and weekends and everything's never taking away from the person who was delivering me a paycheck. And I was kicking butt at that job. But it was about 3 years of overlapping work, and would talk to Susan every so often, be like, hey, I'm starting this business thing. What are your thoughts? And I'll never forget one of the conversations. She said, you should probably get a website that aligns with your name, something that actually matches what the business is called. And so we went out and did that. And I learned a whole lot along the way. But then at, October 5th, 2020 was my first day outside of corporate America that I had officially broken up with corporate.
That's awesome. The first thing that comes to mind for me is what were like the beginnings of starting Latitude? You Googled how to start a business, and was it a quick burn? Like walk me through that, like, and walk our audience through that. Like, was it easy? Was it hard? Did you have to find more mentors? Like what was that like for you to just start it?
Yeah. Yes, it was difficult. Yes, it continues to be difficult. Yes, it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life outside of battling a health issue. This is super difficult. I have a whole stack of notebooks over here. I think there's 64 of them documenting the entire journey back to, and even up before March 4th. Whenever I was just kind of doodling, hey, what are some ideas, talking to my buddies that were entrepreneurial in nature, but not in action. That's where we find a lot of people talk about this, but not so many are actually going to do it and leave and go all in on something that statistically is not likely to succeed. Let's be honest about it, especially a product business, not just a service. So what did I do? I talked to a lot of people. Mind you, whenever I first started and had this idea, here's a funny one. I put a post up on Facebook because I was kind of nervous, if I don't want to put my whole idea out there, somebody might take it and run away with it. And this is $100 billion company. I don't want to lose all those billions and billions of dollars, right? This is young Pete thinking. And I'll never forget, I said, hey, it was very like cryptic, almost so that you couldn't even understand what the heck I was talking about because I wanted to cover my tracks. I didn't want my employer to know what was going on. One person commented on it. I'll never forget. So that was my introduction to social media from a business-esque lens. Safe to say it's grown a little bit since then. I've learned some. But that was really the thing, is putting myself in the room where other people were, right? I learned about this tool called LinkedIn. Had it for up to that point, let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Hadn't posted anything. And for another 3 or 4 years, still didn't really post anything. So just figuring out, hey, what works? A lot of reading, of books, a lot of podcasts, go to events and meetups. There's a lot of, and then I learned about these things called investors, like you fundraise and you raise money. That was a thing to figure out along the way. But it's really just being in sponge mode all the time and figuring out who are the right people to surround yourself with and what is the right feedback and advice to take to heart and not take only with a grain of salt.
Yeah. I know I deal with a lot of clients who are considering making the move and they're always going like, how do I know that decision? You said there was some overlap, right? For you, you're
Mhm.
still in your previous job and you were, being asked to mentor and tell people how to do it and you're building this business. How did you either make that decision or know that you were ready to leave the comforts of the secure paycheck and launch this business?
It's tough. It's really, really tough. And I think it's the decision point or inflection point, if you will, of are you running away from something or are you running to something? And whenever you're able to run to something while also no longer being pulled towards where that stability is, and you're okay with a lot more flexibility that comes with much increased volatility. And that's the balance point. Could I have stayed at the day job paying me a six-figure salary for another couple of years? Probably. Remember this little thing called COVID that came about in 2020, 2021? World's going nuts. Everybody's freaking out. A piece of it was being able to move back to Western PA to be with my family. Fair few family members were drastically impacted then and just before. So you know what? I hear these stories of people regretting not spending time with their folks and their loved ones. I said, the heck with that. I'm going to go and enjoy life while, my mom and dad are still with it. And, my brother and some other family members and friends. That was another piece of it. Were we making enough money to replace my salary? Oh my gosh, no. Had we started to generate like our first payment was three figures, four figures. We hadn't received a five-figure payment at that point in time. So on paper, you're like, what are you doing, bro? This is nuts. It's a
I
little
call
bit
that
cheaper.
paid in experience, right?
What's that?
I call that getting paid in experience, right?
Oh, yeah. And sweat equity out the wazoo and OJT. So the other thing is I got into some business schools around that same time. And it was the decision point of, do I go to business school or do I build a company? And I chose the latter. And you think about it, what am I going to learn in B school? Well, a couple new things from classes, meet some people, cool network, and create new job opportunities. So from my perspective, I'm like, hey, I put a couple $100,000 into this business. I surrounded myself with people around the globe at plenty of different business schools, included but not limited to. And I became the CEO, and I wore a lot of other hats along the way. Still working on a nice blue one like yours, Alex, but progress.
Yeah,
Yes.
Pete, I heard that from one of your podcasts, the moving towards something instead of away from something. And that was very enlightening to me. And same as you, my real breaking point was COVID. It was like, you know what? Life's too short. I can't keep working these 12-hour days, for somebody else. And that was a big thing for me, was spending more time with the family, spending more time on me. And so I think COVID was a big turning point for a lot of people. I think we got more entrepreneurs out of COVID than probably any other time.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
And I think it changes, right? There's different phases of our life. In the book, I talk about your career map and, what is it going to look like? And so at different phases, running your own business makes a lot of sense, and having that stress and chaos and lack of stability, right? And sometimes you got to support other people in your life. So life changes. We know that for sure, especially over the last 6 years alone. And so I think to just be cognizant of that we have this great opportunity in this country to test things. And there's so many opportunities and areas for support along the way that, hey, even if you wind up 35, 40 years old and you have to go back to zero, not the end of the world. You can rebuild. There's a story I just heard the other day, I think on the Mel Robbins podcast, maybe. This guy was incarcerated for like 20 years, a fellow from Philly. I can't remember his name right now, which is a shame. But he learned while he was in prison. And he got out and he built a, marketing and ad company, and he's a speaker, and he's multimillionaire. And he says, you know what? Just is what you decide. There's so many opportunities. You get access to Wi-Fi, get a computer, and a positive can't stop, won't stop attitude. I think being able to talk to people is, a little important as well.
Yeah. 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 I think, Susan, you're right too. It's like, I think COVID put a spotlight on what people really want and value in their work, quotes unquote, life balance. Right. And you're right. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they want that flexibility. They want that balance and being able to spend time with their families. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people want freedom in their work environments. So I think COVID changed a lot. And that's probably a whole other podcast on how many people sprung up and how many entrepreneurs came out from COVID. So I know you started right before COVID and went right into it, sounds like.
Yeah. So you figure Q1 of 2018, people, what was the first tool that we used? myfreeconferencecalls.com and Skype. Who uses those anymore? WebEx was like a super expensive one. And then we started, and here's so Latitude's all about connecting people, right? Mentoring, career map, engagement surveys, personal board of advisors, personality assessment. It started off as just like a networking tool. And you want to talk about one of the tips, we'll probably get into this, but do something. Airbnb talks about it. Other people, Uber, right? They talk about do something manual as long as possible to prove the concept and to give that good customer experience. When it first started, I had an Excel sheet. I still have it. And it said, hey, here's all these people that I've reached out to. And here's the ones that could potentially be a mentor, could potentially be a mentee. They should just have a conversation. I would send a doodle. Remember those where it's like, hey, what time works for each of you? To both of them, I would spend about 10 minutes drafting up a bio and verbiage for each of them, email it, say, hey, here's person 1, person 2, person 3. Tell me who might make sense. Okay, now that you got your doodle pieces, let me go ahead and schedule that conversation. Sweet. Now we got that. I would set up the myfreeconferencecall.com. They'd join in, I'd join in, say, okay, here you go, warm introduction, handoff. And then I leave the call. They go ahead and finish up the conversation. Then I would talk to each of them individually afterwards, be like, hey, how'd it go? Go back into the Excel sheet, and I would update their rating. So it was not what I would call streamlined or lean at all in the beginning process, beginning stages of getting things started. But then you start to learn, hey, where's this adding value? Who else could benefit from this? Asking those kinds of questions along the way. And I think one of the things that entrepreneurs and early business owners forget about is the voice of the customer, and to continue to ask for feedback, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Susan, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that a lot of that, like we said, I think we all had that aha COVID experience, but also, like you said, you still have to build off of what you start with and decide what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, where should you put your efforts to make this really successful. And nothing's more rewarding than paying yourself than having a company making money off of you. And there are people that will always be great at working at a corporate office, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's nothing like being your own boss and, making your own decisions. Because I've had a lot of decisions I wanted made when I was in the corporate world where, either my boss would take credit for it or they didn't want to hear about it because it might not make them look in the best light. And so I think it's important to find out what your goal is. I mean, do you want to be an entrepreneur? Because it's very rewarding, but it's also a lot of work. But we've all done that lot of work. Like you said, Pete, you were working, what'd you say, 8 to 7. And I always had 60-hour weeks. I didn't know anything different. And so that was one of the things I was going to change when I became an entrepreneur was I was not going to work 60 hours. And as you know, Pete, I had an IT consulting company first, and then now I'm in real estate and I'm enjoying helping people because I think that is that small town, we were always told you got to help other people. We didn't know any different. It was always, help people. And,
Mhm.
with real estate, a lot of people don't know coming in, especially the first time home buyers, they don't even know what questions to ask.
Right.
So I love educating first time home buyers.
That's great.
So, Pete, when you're ready, let me know. I'll find you somebody.
Yeah. I
You
I
like
got to
being
get a
home.
couple of other ducks in order, and then the house, yeah, we'll get on the Monopoly board soon. Fewer things to worry about.
Okay, so for all the listeners, the question I kind of want to ask you who are considering starting their own business or, jumping ship from corporate life into entrepreneurship, what fears came up for you or what challenges did you have to overcome and how did you do that?
Money is a big thing, right? So, how can you reduce all expenses? How can you become okay with? I was never a very big spender. I'd put myself in the frugal column for I'd say all of my life. But whenever you lose that salary, your frugality goes up. I don't even know if that's the right word or not, but that's the idea, right? You are pinching every penny and figuring out that you're okay with it. I think a rule of thumb is, hey, can you live for 2 years, right? Give yourself a 2-year runway of your savings. And that's without zero paying yourself from the business and zero revenue generation. It's just a rule of thumb. To do it before you have a family and other commitments, I think is a good thing as well. I do think it's important and valuable to get a bit of a corporate experience exposure first. So there's so much that you can learn, the good and the bad, and a couple of things in the middle of it. One of the things that I wish I knew sooner was this little thing called marketing. Had no idea. They don't teach you that in engineering school. They don't teach you about sales whenever you're leading a team building robots. I got into a little bit of business development, but I had to learn about sales, social media, all this stuff. I was fortunate to have, led a team of 10 up to over 100 people, geographically dispersed multiple different times before going full time into the business. You have to be comfortable with find comfort in discomfort, find comfort in uncertainty. You have to be a self starter. My gosh, do you have to be a self starter? You'll wake up some days and be like, I don't have a meeting today. And maybe I'll just hit the snooze button for a little bit longer. And nobody's boss isn't going to yell at me. And if you do that too many days in a row, then you're like, gosh, I stay in bed until noon. How about this?
Yeah.
And you're realizing, my gosh, I'm not even going to have a bed to be able to stay in if I keep this kind of stuff up. And so strategically finding those other resources, whether it's a legal board of directors or a personal board of advisors or kind of the in between, not legally binding, but a board of advisors for your company as well can be extremely helpful. Those other business mentors, maybe your personal board of advisors changes as you go into this entrepreneurial journey. But it's super important to have that support system whenever, especially if you're a solopreneur or getting started building a team. I'd say they don't really list this statistic, but I think like healthcare burnout is pretty high. HR burnout pretty high.
Yep.
I'd say that burnout for entrepreneurs is in the negative health impacts. I mean, I've had to go to the hospital before. It's pretty embarrassing to say, but it's a reality. You stress yourself out. You push yourself too hard. It's nasty stuff. So to not do it alone is critical.
Yeah. I like what you say about like part of when you learn to be your own boss, you can be like, I don't have to get up. I don't have to do all those little things anymore. And you trying to hold yourself accountable. And I've also found the opposite to be true too. Sometimes you become your own worst boss. And just like I say, you can drive yourself into sickness and overdrive and work yourself almost to death, maybe even more than you were working in corporate.
Oh, yeah.
Learning to find that healthy balance and remembering like why you got into it in the first place. But it does take a lot of grit and it does take a lot of self-determination and getting used to, like you said, the discomfort, being uncomfortable with what it takes to be an entrepreneur, because it does take a lot of sacrifice in order to be one.
Yeah, most definitely. It's not easy. If it was, everybody would do it and succeed
That's right.
quickly.
Right. And hopefully this is not a loaded question, but so you started off teaching, or you were told to find a mentor, you figured out how to find a mentor, and then people came to you and said, how'd you do it? Tell us how to do it. So if you could give like a couple of tips to our viewers on what that's like, could you do that for us?
Yeah, well, I'd say I'll share a couple of points. I'll give a shout out to my book. Susan talked about it earlier, but Pathfinders Navigating Your Career Map with a Personal Board of Advisors. I post about this on LinkedIn as well. But the first thing is figure out who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. It's quite tricky to give advice and support and guidance to somebody if they don't even know who they are, what they want to do, where they want to go. So figure out that for yourself a little bit. And there's some different ideas that we talk about in the book of what kinds of advisors are you looking for. So do your homework first. Maybe put together a draft of a career map. We talk about that in 5 different dimensions. It can be as simple as where you've been, where you're at, where do you want to go, personally and professionally. So you got a little bit of a baseline. And now you can say, okay, well, who is kind of sort of in a role that may be interesting to me? We have this cool tool used by over 1 billion people now called LinkedIn. If you're at an organization, there's usually a global, the GAL, Global Access Listing or something like that, or you can find everybody's contact information. If you're in an office like we used to be back in the day consistently, you could go to these things that we call the water cooler or the coffee maker and just talk to folks, right? People used to leave their door open. And if they weren't on a phone call, I'd knock on the door and say, hey, you got a couple of minutes? Just wanted to introduce myself, see what you're up to and learn about your journey. People love talking about themselves. So just ask, seek first to understand is a very, very big piece along the way. And along the path, update that career map of yours, right? But if you don't ask, it is, again, quite tricky to find people that are just going to stumble onto your lap and say, oh my gosh, I want to help you, Pete. And here's how I'm going to help you. And here's some things for you to think about. And now you're going to get to the top of the food chain. Yeah, good luck. I want to, have whatever coffee those guys are drinking. But I think to be intentional about it, and it takes a lot of time to build and maintain and keep up with relationships, and to also have a bit of self-awareness that it's not just one-sided. So many people, when they go on this mentoring journey, is all about me, I. And as you progress, maybe 6-12 months in, give yourself a chance to appreciate and show some gratitude. And am I perfect? No. So anybody that's listening to this and be like, Pete, you owe me a thank you. Well, yeah, you're right. I probably do. But to every, 6 to 12 months at a minimum, just do a little reflection and say, hey, who's been most helpful and impactful and influential this past quarter, these past 2 or 3 quarters? And just shoot them a text, shoot them a call, shoot them an email. You could even write a note with a pencil and paper. It's a wild concept, but I hear they still work.
When, Alex did that to me, she wrote me a note and I was like, I hadn't really known her that long. And I was like, wow, that is awesome. And then as we started talking, we were like, oh my gosh, our backgrounds are so similar. And her being a business coach, approached me about the podcast. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a great idea. Because again, we get to help people, but we also get to know other entrepreneurs because most of us are solo entrepreneurs and we don't have those other offices that we could go to when we were in the corporate world. We really need our group of people, like you had stated, that can help us when we have questions or concerns or does this sound right? Sounding boards are great, but when you're out there pounding the pavement, it's sometimes hard to stop and say, you know what, let me run this past somebody. Does it make sense? It sounds like it's a good idea to me, but it may not really make sense because we're working in our business, on our business, but there are people that could be customers that may say, no, that's not something that would interest me,
Yeah.
if you did that. So I find it very interesting that we can kind of find other entrepreneurs that really do want to help other entrepreneurs. And, like you said, I've known you for a long time and I know you've been trying to do this for a long time. And I'm just so happy to see how well I'm reading your bio and I was like, dang, Pete, I didn't know this and this and this. So, yeah, that's awesome that you're doing so well with it. But I also know you are probably one of the hardest workers I know, because I know when you worked at Lockheed, you were living at that place. And I knew you had it in you, but it's always nice to see, your success.
Well, I appreciate that. And there's a lot of, what was in sixth grade, one of our local sportscasters came to a basketball banquet at the end of the season, and he gave us this quote that my dad never stops reminding me of. Champions are made when nobody's watching. And you have no idea, whether it's a lot, whether it's a little, how much goes on behind the scenes. You hear about these stories of Slack and Airbnb, and even Crumble went through some tough times. Duolingo, there's a lot of different stories of these organizations that go through these trials and tribulations and pivots. And, other people that say, hey, it's on the second or third or fourth one whenever things really click. But I think to be able to say, hey, thanks for those kind words, Susan, means a lot. And this is something where I wasn't very good. People say, hey, good job. And I'd say, oh, yeah, just doing my work over here. I love praise. I have a big ego. I'll be the first one to tell you, right? And I think that the important piece of that is to accept the gratitude and the accolade. It's just a quick reflection moment for anybody that's listening. If I brush off that kudos that you just shared to me, you might not be as likely to give a compliment to somebody else if they don't acknowledge it and appreciate it. And those that are listening, if I just kind of brush it off and I say, oh, yeah, no big deal, right? Then it sort of leads by example that maybe it's not cool for them to accept. And there's those positive brain chemicals that fire whenever those things do happen, just for me and for you and for those other people listening. And so I think whenever we do hear something that is kind and praiseworthy in nature, it is important to process and accept and appreciate so that even more people can positively benefit. So thank you. It does mean a lot to me.
That's awesome. Yeah, Susan and I met in networking, and she is a pro at referrals. It's what she does. She's an amazing connector of people. I imagine if we had old school Rolodexes, hers would just be like one of those giant ones, but we have the phones now. But she just has this innate ability to not only connect, but she's always thinking about other people. And so when I met her, that's why I talked about the note. I think I gave you a little gift too with it. I was just like, I have to connect with her, and I wanted to make an impression.
Was it a handwritten note, Alex?
Yeah, I think it was a handwritten note.
Absolutely.
And like a little, and I didn't want her to forget me, because I was like, Susan is somebody I want to know, and I don't want her to forget who I am. So I wanted to make an impression, like something unforgettable.
And it was unforgettable, because we are like best friends now and we love working together. But had I not gotten that from her, I might have still, just gone through the networking thing. And, it made me want to approach her because she was seeing what I was doing for other people. And, I love doing referrals. And as a realtor, man, we get asked for every type of business out there. And, I do probably 10 times more referrals than referrals I get, but I'm a karma person. So it'll come back to me. It doesn't have to be from that particular person that I did something for, but people do remember that. And, I've had people say, oh my God, I didn't even know you knew me, but I have cards and I'm like, this person needs this person, so I'll connect them up. And I love doing it because people are appreciative and they always come back and say they're appreciative. So yeah, it's just, like I said, that was a turning point for Alex and I. So it is a big deal to let people know that. They make it,
well, and it's that networking and creating that community, because we're both solo entrepreneurs. So we collaborate, not only on this podcast, but we collaborate in business and networking, and how, we just help each other out. So I know that you also mentioned, Pete, the importance of networking. Do you have any advice on that for people who I know that there's so many people who I don't know if I should do it. I don't know if it's that important. Do you have any advice for them?
Do it.
Even
if you're an introvert, this is one of the things that I enjoy doing for fun, right? Network. Some people go skiing, some people go to the beach. I love meeting new people and connecting them. I think that's the reason that the three of us, get on quite well. But it's really just the more people that I can meet, the more people I can help. So there's a whole chapter in the book around networking. There's sections in there around introverts. And think about it like this. The best time to find a job is while you already have one. There's the right bosses will never get mad at you for networking proactively. You don't have to be looking for a job while networking. What if you were able to meet other people that are in your industry to hear what they're going through, the goods, the bads, the uglies? What if you were able to talk to other leaders or other aspiring leaders and see what's on their minds? What's top priority? What's keeping them up? Where are they trying to go and grow? How might you be able to help them? Once we get into a certain level of an organization, we might have direct reports. We might have to do some of the hiring and firing. And if we're able to start to build those muscles of getting out into the community, building up relationships internally, right? There's a lot of networking that can happen inside of an organization, but also regionally. And then at conferences, put yourself out there. So I love this networking stuff. As far as where does it typically take place? I'm a fan. I'm part of Rotary Club. There's, I don't know how many, 37,000 chapters around the globe, something crazy like that, with millions of members. I don't know the latest number. Maybe it's hundreds of thousands of members. But get involved with something that leads to a lot of volunteer activities. A big proponent of, if we can help people and meet people, geez, oh man, that's like all the world's coming together, the best things. And if it's outside, that's pretty cool too. I got involved with coaching at Knock High School, involved with Swickley Academy, involved with a couple of nonprofits around the Pittsburgh area. Got involved with the American Heart Association while I was in DC, a couple of other groups, professional associations, whether it's, Program Management Institute or something with ISSA or SHRM, different associations and member groups are very helpful. Even if it's just something from church or a religious organization, to go and mingle and meet people there. Go back to your high school and just ask what they're doing for alumni days or events. Go back to your college. Go on to LinkedIn. You can do this virtual networking. There's this app or website, whatever, called Meetup. And you can just type in things. You can go on Eventbrite. There's plenty of free things that you can just go explore. And so my advice to you, if you're, I don't really want to do that, more on the introverted, less Pete side, if you will, try the digital stuff first to, flex those muscles initially and knock some dust off. And then go with a friend to some of those events so that you let the walls down slowly. But there's plenty of times where you're going to walk into a room and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know anybody in here. That's happened to me. Probably happened to both of you. And what do? I'd kind of be curious to hear what each of you do whenever you don't know anybody in a room. I'd go to the bar, whether I get something alcoholic or non-alcoholic, doesn't really matter. Talk to the person in front of you, talk to the person behind you, talk to the bartender. Usually there's some food, go through the food line. Once you have a free hand, of course, talk to the people at the sign-ins. Hey, can I help you? That's an interesting way, if you need a hand with anything. And then just walk up to people where there's maybe a little bit of a room at a table and say, hey guys, I'm Pete. Just wanted to come over and say hello. I don't know anybody here. And, I might just start with y'all and see what they have to say. If they say nothing and they kind of shut you off, it's unlikely, but then go to the next table and try it again. I bet you wouldn't go 0 for 3. But I asked that question back to both of you real quick. What do you do whenever you go to a networking event in person? You don't know anybody in there.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I get asked that a lot, even from my clients. So for me personally, if I'm walking through a room and I happen to know, especially a networking event, and I know nobody, then I'm usually finding like the ambassador, asking who, their leadership team is, and trying to meet that person. Then once I meet that person, I tell them what I do and ask them, who should I talk to, and let them help me with introductions. And sometimes that actually cuts through, like, I don't have to waste my time with meeting people that might not work well with me, especially if my goal is to find people that works well within my industry. But it just helps me, like, I don't have to actually lead the charge. All I have to do is find one person to help me introduce to others. But if I don't have that, if no, I can't really pinpoint anybody, then I usually just walk up to a group of ladies or whoever's talking together, and I just kind of stand there and I said, "Oh, hi, my name's Alex. This is my first time here." Normally, if you just say those, "It's my first time here," everyone knows and remembers what it feels like to be like the first time in the room. And they'll usually open up and either they'll finish their conversation and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, like, who are you? What's your name? What do you do?" And they'll start including you in the group. So that's usually what I do. Yeah.
Nice.
For me, I've done both of those things, but what seems to work the best for me is I find those introverts that are standing there by themselves and they're so excited that somebody took the time to spend time with them. My first business book, which helped me get my first job ever, was Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I was reading Warren Buffett's book the other day, and he read that book and he said that was helpful to him even as a young entrepreneur when he was still in high school. And so people love to talk about themselves and I let them do all the talking. And it's not a big deal if they know everything about me right away, but I gave them the platform and people remember that. And Alex knows there's people in our networking group that just follow me around because they know that they'll learn from me, because I do find the people that need the most help from somebody who doesn't have that fear of meeting other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually run, or I'm the president of one of the largest seat exclusive groups here in Denton. As the president, I actually make it a point, like anytime, especially somebody new or a newer member or pursuing member comes in, I'm always the first one to greet them. I'll stop what I'm doing. If I'm talking to somebody who's, been a current member for a long time, I will pause that conversation and make sure I go greet them because I know exactly what that's like to walk in
by
the room and,
example.
to have no idea what to do and who to talk to. And so I give them the rundown of how this group works, and you can go network now. And I introduce myself, I ask them what they're doing, ask them for their card. And so if they meet at least nobody else, they at least met the president of the room, right?
Yeah.
So I make sure I do that for everyone. If I miss them and they've already sat down, then I will go beeline it for them before the meeting starts.
And you keep a tab of it. Susan, as you were talking, there's a page in the book where it goes through the 8 of the different personas in a networking room. And it seems like the wallflower or the newcomer or the exploratory seeker or the observer were some of the individuals that you were going to seek out, with you in the middle as the chill veteran or the energetic super connector, if you will, is kind of the hub with the spokes surrounding it.
That's definitely Susan.
Well, and when you grow up one of 9 children, like you have to speak up if you're going to ever be heard. I said I grew up in a company because we had to work together. There was 11 of us, and I just knew that if I was going to get anywhere with this family, I had to speak up. And I'm usually the person that, takes care of everybody and loves to, help everybody. But we were, like you said, we were raised to help people. That's our main goal, is to make a difference in someone's life.
I also say this, and I am a natural introvert. And so it's definitely not like the first thing I want to do is go and jump into a group. It's something that I put my reps in, and I have goals. When I step out of my vehicle, I'm like, okay, today we're going to talk to so many people. And we're going to collect so many business cards. Like, especially on the days like I'm just not in the mood to, Susan knows we do so much networking. And by the end of the week, we're like on our 5th event and you're just like, you're exhausted. At least for me, extroverts, I know they get charged by talking to people. By Friday, I'm just like holding on for dear life. Like, okay, one more event, girl, we got this, So, all right, Pete, we're getting close to time. And is there anything that we haven't asked you, or anything that you would like to tell our listeners about your journey, or what you have learned that we haven't spoken about yet?
Yeah, I think to continue sharpening the saw, looking at some of the Steve Covey books over here, continue investing in yourself, right? At good companies, they're hopefully investing in their talent. So we have to continue doing that for ourselves, surrounding ourselves with the right people. So don't go it alone. Continue learning. Figure out where you may be able to creatively delegate. There are certain things you have to do yourself, especially for such an amount of time. But, Fiverr, Upwork, I use a lot of different things off of Fiverr, especially early on, and we'll still go back to certain different folks over there. Partnerships can be great, and oftentimes they can be a great waste of time. And so really set out with intention. A lot of people say, hey, I want to partner with you. And that could be okay. But make sure you have a couple of KPIs or what good looks like with each of those. I think to do a reflection every 3 to 6 months of start, stop, continue, shift. This is something that we talk about, SSCS. Is there anything I can say no to? And being able to say no to more things, right? Just think about how much you guys get reached out on LinkedIn and Facebook, other places. Hey, buy this, buy this, buy this, do this. Oh, I love the spammy messages whenever they're like, we're going to turn you into $10 million MRR by yesterday. Just take my short course for, $3,000. So the other piece of advice in there is if it seems too good to be true, it probably is, but don't be afraid to ask those questions along the way. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of marketing and your brand and being persistent and consistent and ultimately just you.
Yeah. That's awesome. So as we're wrapping up here, tell us what you're doing now. Tell us a little bit about your business. How can people find you, your book, reach out to you if they're interested in purchasing the book or hearing more about what you're doing? So give us an update there.
Yeah, quickest thing is to just find me on LinkedIn, Pete Schramm. You'll see me up there. There's a link to access the book. We shared it earlier. Here's what it looks like. I share a lot of resources that align with our conversation today. Latitude, we're working with organizations, typically 100, 200, 300 plus employees, work with organizations that want to do something to invest in their talent. So the comment that I just made a little bit ago, if an organization that you're working at or looking to work at is using our software, that is probably a great sign that they do care about their people. But we provide personality assessment that we built, engagement survey for the organization. We have a mentor match assessment. So a lot of times, companies say, let's do a mentoring program. And they typically stink. So they can be good, but it's just because they don't have enough resources, the time, they don't know really what they're doing, the accountability or follow-up or reporting. So all that's done for you inside of our software. Every employee gets to put together a career map of those things that I talked about. And so from a leader, you're kind of like, whoa, now I can understand how many of my employees have documented where they want to go and grow, which, oh, by the way, is one of the biggest reasons that people leave an organization. So we try and take care of that and address that. And I do a lot of speaking. So organizations from, just a couple of people, whether it's at a conference or a school or an organization, up to thousands. I gave a TED Talk in front of 4,000 people, which was a pretty remarkable experience, and love being able to positively impact people's lives. I'm coaching a TED Talk this year. I won't be coaching basketball this year. And we also do work with an organization called ProMark. And so they mostly career transition and outplacement. And what that means, I didn't really know at the beginning, but my whole thing, my mission is so that nobody has to navigate their professional journey alone. Well, what if a company is getting ready to lay off like 100 people? Wouldn't it be nice if they had like a career concierge helping them in transition? So I'd say they're pretty solid at that. You can decide. But whenever folks work with them, which has been tens of thousands over more than 60 years, all around the world, they get jobs 50% faster. And it's one of the highest corporate NPS ratings I've ever seen.
Wow.
So they do a pretty good job. A little bit of corporate coaching and executive coaching and trainings as well, but really collaborating with those guys quite a bit. So let me know if I can help or connect. Please reach out as you're listening to this. Reach out on LinkedIn. And I have one question for you ladies before we wrap up. So let's fast forward to the beginning to middle of 2027, what does success for this podcast really look like for both of you? Part one. And part two is how can I and the other listeners and guests of your show help that success become a reality?
That is a great question. For me, success of this podcast in 2027 would look like we've not only had amazing guests on, but we've maybe had an impact on at least one person who has listened to the podcast and was able to either make that decision to either start up their entrepreneurship career and did so not only boldly, but was able to do that efficiently with the advice that they heard on this podcast. How listeners can help is if they have an amazing story and they think they can help, let us know. And also, if anybody is struggling and needs help, then let us connect, whether that's, working with me or whether that's, they need help finding a network locally or connecting with one of our guests because they connected well with their story and they need to work with them, then great, let's do that. If we can support the other people who have been on this podcast and also amplify their businesses, that's amazing as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Alex. I mean, our goal was to not only help the entrepreneurs that are stepping up like yourself, but also help the people that need the help, that wouldn't be in your shoes and can see that they can eventually be in your shoes, that they can actually be successful. It's also that, we want people to realize that, we are learning from every guest we have. I go back and I make notes on, things that we've heard. Yesterday, we had somebody on the podcast that said about a realtor book that she used, even though she's not a realtor, but she said it was an amazing book that helped her with her career. And I'm thinking, wow, as a realtor, that would be a great book for me to know. I didn't know about that book prior to that. So they are helping us succeed as well as us helping them. It's always a good thing if it's a two-way street. You never want people to feel like we're just doing this to help ourselves. We want to help everybody, but we want to also be able to help ourselves because we are sometimes silos. We don't have all these people around us. And, I did the thing that I was going through my Rolodex and I'm like, Pete, I know Pete has really succeeded. I'm going to call Pete. And there was no question there because you and I knew each other. You knew that I would be helping you. You would be helping me. So, there's those people out there. You just have to remember to go through your Rolodex every once in a while. And I am really sounding old now. Go through your LinkedIn is where I get the majority of my people. But, I was at an event this morning and people were asking about the podcast because I was at an event where the person was hosting the event and I said, hers is dropping tomorrow. And people were like, where's it at? How can I get to it? How can I get on your podcast? So, it's helping each other. And that's never a bad thing when you can help somebody else succeed because it will come back to you and people will remember who helped them along the way. I know I do.
Yep. That's a great question, Pete. Thank you.
Yes, it was.
Well, thank you so much, Pete, for being on the show. I know your time is valuable and we promised an hour and we're right at it. We will include all your links within the podcast on Spotify and YouTube so everyone can find it there. And as we post it on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. So it should be easy to find you there. But yeah, thank you for everything. Thank you for telling your story. Thankful for all the helpful hints that you gave. I think everyone will be appreciative of it and grow. And maybe we sprouted just another entrepreneur today.
Thanks, guys. This was fabulous.
Yeah. Thank you. This is the beginning of your next chapter.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Up with Corporate. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Until then, remember, you don't have to do this alone.